Hey, I'm so excited that you're here with another episode of the Fiercely Here Women in Business podcast. And woohoo, you are in for a treat today. So this is Therese Skelly, and today I'm super excited to bring you Alison Donaghey. So we met when she invited me to her podcast. And after like 4 minutes, we had this like little girl romance going on. We're just like, she has a fabulous story. I love what Alison is about in the world. And so I'm just going to turn it to you. So tell us a little bit about who you are in the business world. What do you do today? And then I'll ask you the questions and we'll proceed with our interview.
Sounds good. Well, my name is Alison and I own a company called Domino Thinking, where I challenge people to think about what they think about. At least that is how it started. And then like most things, it morphs into something else. And so what it's morphed into for me is working on this process called My Part. And I would love to see it become a movement, us accepting accountability for how we co-create our life. And that is not about shame or blame or any of those things. It's just about the construction of the situation and what the part that we play. And it's just been really amazing working with people around this and how it's changing their lives, allowing them to leave a victim state. So it's a pretty cool, cool existence.
That is good. Yeah, my body's like, whoa, that's really awesome. But cool. Well, this is called the Fiercely Here Women in Business podcast. So Alison, what is it? Because you are a fierce AF sister. What does it mean to you to be fiercely here? Like, how do you embrace that? How does that show up in your life and business?
Yeah. Well, I think it's, that word authentic really drives me crazy because it's misused in so many ways. But when we can show up truly connected to our internal worth, that is where our authenticity comes from, our empowerment, all of that. Like you can't have it without having internal worth. It is an internal exercise. And so I think when people show up fierce, it's because they know who they are. There are people I think who show up fierce and it's just obnoxious. Right. Because it's a subtle difference, but there is a difference between somebody who is strong and in the center of who they are and going through life on their own terms and somebody who is just trying to be obnoxious. But I think when we are truly connected with our fierceness, it's when this is who I am, this is how I see the world, and take it or leave it.
Woo. Nice. Do you ever find, because you're a really strong woman, have you ever gotten pushback like, God, you're being such a bitch, or God, or worse, you're acting like a man? Like, have you ever heard that?
Oh, all the time.
Yeah,
my first company is a house painting company. And so I was a single mom on welfare when I started it. And I started it 20 years ago. Women were not in the trades back then. And so I got an awful lot of pushback. But for me, the way I see that is you can do one of two things. I can either say, oh, I'm so sorry. How would you like me to show up? Or you can say, yeah, maybe I'm not your people. Right. And you definitely are not mine. So it's, and then just carry about doing what you're doing. Like I was too busy trying to put food on a table to care what other people were saying. So I think sometimes when we get too caught up in what other people think of us, it's because we are not fully embedded in what we're doing and we're not staying busy enough.
Love it. Because I think that's one of the objections, you know what I mean? Like women are so afraid of well, what if they judge me? What if they call me a bitch? Oh, so be a bitch.
Say thank you.
It's a beautiful thing. Right. But I think we look at the fear and that holds people back. So I just wanted to bring that in the beginning. Like, does that ever happen to you? So that's a great
and one step deeper on that too, I think there's a lot of toxic feminism out there that tells us this is going to happen. And if we buy into that thought process, it's going to happen. Whereas I just refuse to let that be a part of my existence. If it's water off a duck's back, if somebody doesn't like me, and a lot of people don't like me, and that's okay, because a lot of people do like me, which is great. And those are the people that I'm here for. And when we buy into this fact that as women, we are victims, that clouds everything we do. So I think we have to be really careful about making sure we step back and look at that toxic feminism and if it's impacting us.
That's really
because it certainly impacted me in many ways.
I got to this state, obviously I'm a more mature woman. I've got a few wrinkles to show. And I also have and I don't give a fuck anymore because I spent so much of my life, so many years, so many relationships, so much effort in making sure I was what you want me to be and doing all, and it is draining as hell. And so to me, part of the fiercely here is it doesn't matter what other people, I love how you frame that when you're centered in your being, water off your back, right?
Yeah, because it truly does become about them. If there is somebody that thinks I'm a bitch for speaking up about something, that is because their worth is not intact.
Ding, ding,
I
ding.
don't need to go through life thinking that a woman might be a bitch or not be a bitch, because it has no bearing on my life. So I don't get to have an opinion about it.
Whew,
Right?
I got
When
goosebumps. Teachable moment right there. It's not about you. It's about their shit, right?
Yeah,
Like, that's
it
really
really
what
is.
it is. I love
And
that.
when I believe that we're on this journey of searching for our worth. It's so everything we do comes down to worthiness. I'm either trying to create it or I'm finding it within myself. And so when people are saying things about you that don't feel good, it's because they're trying to get their worth from putting you down.
So I just want to stop this for a moment. We
Mm.
got to freeze the frame, because if you are a woman who has been raised to be codependent, because we all are, if you're over 40, generally raised to, be nice, but don't speak unless you can say nice things, like that. Like, we're forever out there scanning the environment, looking for approval, looking for acceptance. And what I'm hearing you say is, it doesn't matter. It's got to start inside. Right.
Yeah.
So
Yeah. And
love
the
that.
kindness stems from that. The empathy stems from that, right? Like, if I am internally intact in my worthiness, I get to support you without trying to change you.
Woo!
Right. And so that is this really beautiful place to live and interact with people. I had a woman say to me the other day, you're the only person that not only didn't judge my relationship with my husband, but actually treated him well, despite what you knew. And I said, well, it wasn't my relationship to have an opinion about. And
Wow.
so when we get to that place, we get to interact with people, and there's an awful lot of good things in be nice. Well, actually, I think it's more about be kind than be nice.
Kind
I
is
think
better,
there's a
yeah.
difference.
Right.
And to care about the people that are around us, and to not intentionally hurt people and those sort of things. Like, there's value in the way that we're raised as women, but there's a double-edged sword. And so there's that crappy part too, which we internalize as I should stay silent.
Right.
And I disagree with that.
So today, the Alison that I know is kind of a badass, right? And I always want to hear, I'm a huge fan of like journey stories. Like, how the heck did you get here? Like, tell us the journey, because you talked about being a single mom on welfare. And so, I mean, like kind of give us some snapshots of, like, Alison, what the journey's been for you, and maybe lessons along the way.
Well, I would have to say I was always a bit of an outsider growing up. Like, the teachers, I swear to God, they sat in the staff room and went, oh no, we got her in our class again. Because I was always questioning things. I was always that person who said, yesterday you said this and today you're saying this. It's totally different.
Right.
Which is it, right? And then, so there's that component to growing up, being slightly different than the people who are towing the line. And so I think it was pretty evident from a young age that I probably was not going to go through the world the same way as other people maybe chose to. And so my parents got divorced when I was 12, so nobody else was getting divorced. So I was like, the odd one out, but I totally supported it because they weren't happy. It made no sense to me for them to stay together. And then when I was 18, I was on the pill and I got pregnant, and I'd never held a baby before. I'd never been in the same room as a baby. Like, it was, damn. And I spent an awful lot of time contemplating whether or not I should actually go through with it. Like, was I equipped? And thank God I went through with it. I am a big pro-choicer, so for me, that was an option. And then I met Bob. I was on welfare and I met him, and he was a painter. I was going to university full time. I was working 3 jobs, single mom. And I met Bob, and he says, I can teach you how to paint and you'll make more money. You'll get to see your kid. And I'm like, I don't care what you want me to do. If I get to see my kid, I will do it. And so I ended up moving in with him. And the weekend before I moved in, he relapsed into IV drug addiction. And my whole world sort of became something very, very different. I thought I'd been around the block a few times, but there was nothing that could have prepared me for that lifestyle. And it took 6 years for it to work its way through. He ended up actually dying, which was what released me from that relationship.
Wow.
Because
Wow.
I definitely had that. I can't abandon somebody while they're in need,
Of
right? There's
course.
that toxic part of the way women
Yes.
are raised.
Right.
And I felt a responsibility. I felt like he would die if I left. And guess what? He died anyway. And I gave up
Mm.
years of my life worried about something, the inevitable, right? And so when he died, I was, $10,000 in debt. I
Wow.
didn't know what I was going to do. I had no food for the table, like nothing. And so it was time to grow up, sweetheart, and figure this out. And because all my energy was no longer focused on
Mhm.
his addiction,
Mhm.
I started a house painting company, and I thought I'll do it for a year until I figure out what I really want to do.
Mhm.
And in the meantime, I finished my degree. So I have criminology, psychology, and sociology behind me, and I got my Bachelor of Arts, and I just thought, oh, I'll do this until my kid graduates now. And then he graduated, and then the economy tanked, and I was like, oh, I guess I'm going to stick around with this. And then my son's working for my company, and now he's taking
Mm.
it over, and so it really is about just trying to find your way and try to stay as true as possible to who you are.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
How do I've had issues with, I was married to an addict off and on. I mean, he didn't use all the time, but it was years of addiction, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so I know what it's like to be so powerless and just get trapped in this, I got to fix it. And the powerlessness of that, right?
Yeah.
And so how did you keep going? Because I'm sure a lot of listeners, maybe your partner isn't an addict, or maybe you've got a sick kid, or maybe there's, you've got a situation that is siphoning your energy off. So
Yeah.
what would you say today? Like, because it's so easy to lose yourself. Like you said, we're trained for this.
Yeah.
How do you counsel people to pull back?
Well, it's now the work that I do with My Part program, connecting with our internal worth. Where is it coming from? How are you co-creating that? Sure, I lived with an addict, but I co-created our
Right,
life.
right,
It didn't, at the time, I thought it was happening to me,
right.
but it was happening as a result of me. And so
Mm,
it's really about sitting back, releasing the feelings that you're having around the situation, and try to understand the construction of the situation, because our emotions can sometimes make us overprotective of ourselves or defensive or any of that sort of stuff. But if we can suspend all of that
mhm,
and look, okay, this is the situation, this is what he does or she does, this is what I do,
mhm.
and start breaking it down, and then make a decision if that's the life you want.
Right,
And if it is, then how can you adjust it so it's not toxic for yourself? And if it's not, then how do you get out?
right. You know
Mm-hmm.
what I find though is people, and this is really sad, there's actually a payoff to staying a victim.
Oh my God, yes. There's a payoff in everything. So why would we be exempt in that area,
Right.
right?
And so I remember, so after I got divorced, I would, when you go on first dates, you go, oh, tell me about your horrible ex. And then you're like, and I was like, oh, well, mine overdosed. And I'm like, wearing the badge if I was wronged. And then a few years later, I'm like, yeah, we just changed. You know what I mean? It's just like after a while, the
Yeah.
story, because I really had to look at, well, I chose to stay. Like, yeah, he
Mm-hmm.
might have done this, but it was me who stayed.
Yeah.
I'm
And
not,
that is a beautiful example
right,
of one, how your worthiness, your relationship to your
right.
internal worth changed. Because once you got to free yourself from the war story and sharing that,
Mhm.
pity party
Over
story,
and over and over.
and
Yeah.
you were able to get to that place of, yeah, it just didn't work out.
Yeah.
That is a huge
Right.
indicator of internal worth, because you no longer need that other person's reaction to your
Mhm.
sob story.
Okay, just
Mhm.
punctuate that. Ding, 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 ding. And I want you listeners to just ask yourself, is there any part of you that's kind of getting off on being a victim? Or this is terrible to say. I have like lots of dating experience, right? And I think in the beginning, I used to get off on the drama, the ones like, oh my God, he's going to break up. Oh no, because I had come from that, right? And
Mhm.
we literally, our physiology gets wired to chaos and drama. And so we seek it. That's why you replace
Yeah.
one drunk with another drunk. You replace one abusive person with another. It's like
Yeah.
we seek it out because that's now our set point.
It's our normal, right? So I propose we find a new normal, but that has to be done
Beautiful.
with consciousness. You can't,
Right.
you, if you're with an addict, for example, and you don't do the work, you're going to end up with another addict,
Absolutely.
because that's what your normal is.
Right.
And so you have to create this new normal as well. You know, I had a client one time and she went through my program and she called me up, I think it's like on week 4 or 5. And she's like, I'm so mad at you this week. And I went, oh, what did I do?
Yeah, yeah.
And she said, this whole thing about pay value. Around being a victim. She goes, I did not enjoy being a victim until I started thinking about it. And then I realized I did actually get a benefit to being a victim, becoming a victim. And she said, and I realized I was using my victim state against my husband to manipulate and control him. And I didn't know I was doing it. And we've had a conversation about it. She said, you know, my relationship was in trouble and I didn't even know it because of this. She said, so just understanding that there is an enjoyment to being a victim, and it's a statement. It's not a judgment, right? There is times that I fall in a victim state and I'm like, bring on this sympathy. I need people to feel sorry for me, right? It happens. But the question is how long do you stay there?
Exactly. And I don't think anybody's like, yay, I'm so happy. But I feel like it's identity. It becomes how you move about the world. It becomes what you talk about, you know, like when I was first divorced, one of my girlfriends and I would be like, oh, well, you think your ex-husband's bad. Oh my God. And we would commiserate. And there's like a trauma bond. You know what I mean? Like we bond with people around our shitty lives. And then if you don't have shitty lives, it's like, what else am I going to talk about? What's the way for you? Really? It's not boring. It's so boring. And so the reason I'm bringing this up is I always believe if you have awareness, you have choice, right? And so the most important thing is, as you said earlier, no shame, no judgment. It just is a thing. And so how do you teach people? Because I'm all about, let's look at the patterns, let's pull it up, make it conscious. How do you teach that? Because you talk about deconstructing. So give us your 2 cents on it.
Yeah, well, I offer an 8-week program and it just helps people go through to understand where their worth is coming from, how they co-create it, and then how do they want their new normal to look like? How do we navigate through that process to create this new normal? And I've created a game.
A game?
Yeah, it's called Time to Talk. And so what it does is it helps you practice with other people's shitty situations because we can talk about somebody else's crappy life without emotion attached to it.
Absolutely.
Right?
Great.
Maybe we're getting a little bit of happiness because they're miserable and we're not. And then we're like comparing and getting some validation that way. But that all aside, we're not going to get as emotionally caught up in the details of what it is. So this game is really about looking at a scenario and who is the person in the scenario and creating this profile around this person. And then why do they feel like a victim in this situation? And then how did they contribute to that situation? And then what is their new normal? And so when people practice this on non-emotionally charged issues, it makes it a lot easier for them to do it with themselves as well.
It's retraining.
Never start with your worst problem. I'm just, this is one of those little warning symbols that you see on hair dryers. Don't do it in the shower. But really it's start with something manageable because stuff is going to come up.
Well, give me an example, because I know you talked about with your ex, but like in life or business, how do you give me an example of how you shift, like a tangible, like this happened and then I did my process and I got here.
Right. Well, I can talk about a couple of people that I've worked with. So one woman, she's done an awful lot of spiritual work and she was at a relatively healthy place that we could talk about an issue this big, but sometimes it's just not the big issues we should start with. But for her, it was her husband cheated on her. And she said to me, she goes, explain to me how I'm not the victim in all of this. And I'm like, all right, let's have a seat.
Yeah, that's a good one. That's a good challenge, right?
And we talked about how she ignored and neglected and manipulated her husband because she was trying to get her worth from her first husband and her father. And so she had her back to her husband while parading him in front of her ex and her first husband and her dad, going, look how worthy I am. This young, handsome man wants me. And she was completely oblivious to his needs. And so here he is trying to get his worth from somebody who isn't even looking at him. So he started looking for his worth elsewhere. And he did this. For him, it was through having affairs. Is it okay to have an affair in a relationship? That's not the point. The point is, because in some relationships, it is okay. That is how they work. That is an agreement they have. Maybe they're poly, maybe there's something else. I don't know. And I know people who have girlfriends on the side, their wives know about it. And it's a very functional relationship.
It's just the agreements they have that are different, right?
Right. And so we don't need to have a judgment around any of that. So then she said to me, she's like, oh my God, I totally got caught up in this self-worth loop. And I did ignore him and I did contribute to that. Wow. And so she was then they ended up getting divorced, which, fair. Like this is not about staying in a situation and making something broken better if it's broken. And so, but now they have a really amicable relationship. And, I had another client who, these all seem to be relationship ones I'm giving you, but she said that I did a half-day workshop and she said, oh, it's all my husband's fault. It's his fault our relationship broke down. It's his fault we're having a messy divorce. If only he would just fill in the blank.
You were probably like ready to pounce. Yeah.
And so at the end of the course, I just sort of went along with it. At the end of the half-day workshop, she said to me, she goes, oh my God, I co-created this, didn't I? And I said, I don't know, did you? She goes, I totally did. She phoned the mediator and said, hey, can you tell him that I understand this is not all his fault?
Wow.
And they went on to have this really amicable divorce, and they're actually pretty good friends now. And so whether it's a working relationship or a personal relationship, we do play a part. And when we own that, it means so much to the other person, not just ourselves.
Well, what I hear too is, Alison, the freedom of letting the story go, because the story keeps you sick. The story keeps you tethered to whatever the thing was, as opposed to, oh, I did that. All right, I'm choosing differently now. Right?
Yeah. And the story's not true.
Right. Well, here's
the story that you are remembering of your past is not true.
What? Okay, hold on. Sometimes, and you've heard this concept, spiritual bypassing. So where's the space of, because like, for example, I just got sort of screwed out of something, this thing I was hoping to get and kind of got ghosted and this thing didn't happen. And I'm like, oh, I was promised, and I'm sick of feeling like a victim, right? So then it would be easy to go, oh, well, all things happen. It's happening for me and not to me, blah, 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 blah. Do you see, some people don't really do the work. They just bypass it. And I don't know if that's really cleaned up. They just have a little, like, what's your take on that? Because I hear that in the conscious world. Oh, don't spiritual bypass. So how do you talk about that?
I think there's, like everything, it's a double-edged sword.
Yeah.
I find that for me, because I've done so much work around this victim state, and when I'm feeling like a victim, how I'm co-creating all of that, I'm able to look at a situation like that and go, okay, I whatever I did, I did. I no longer need to really understand it. I just need to acknowledge that I somehow co-created that.
Okay.
But what you're talking about is, I think, is, if I understand correctly, is like those people just focus on the positive.
Yes.
But those negative things are still going to be there. And if you haven't worked through them, they're going to show up again. So you can spiritually bypass a bad relationship all you want, but you're almost definitely going to end up in another one that's the same, because you haven't done the work to earn the right to bypass it that way.
I know.
Does that make sense?
Yeah, I work with people and they'll be like, oh, I should forgive. I'm like, no, you shouldn't. No, you shouldn't. Because you need to process it. You need to go through anger. You need to feel all the feelings, and then maybe you can get to forgiveness. But I think we're so quick to like whitewash it, right?
Yeah.
So.
And what I'm finding as well is I don't think I'm having as many feelings about things as I used to.
Oh, nice.
Right. And so I find that processing time shrinks. There are definitely some things that get my goat, and I don't understand why I'm so triggered by something. But then that's a perfect opportunity to say thank you for shining light on something I need to work on, as opposed to blaming that person for triggering me.
Right.
And so I think when we, there's so many ways of getting around it, but I do find that I am way less emotionally charged than I used to be.
Isn't that lovely?
It is so freeing.
It is so,
I am not being controlled by external forces the same way as I used to be.
Ding, ding, ding. This is the goal. This is like, stuff's going to fly at you. And the goal is, how do I manage that? What tools do I have, instead of letting it blow you over, right? Life's going to happen. You're going to get kicked in the head. Things are going to break down. And what tools do you have? So what other tools do you use? Because I hear a lot, like the whole thing about your worth and a lot of self-reflection and owning yourself and taking responsibility. What are the things do you teach that like these are my top 3 or top 5 that like gotta have in place?
Right. Well, one of the other things that I talk about too a lot is called what I coin think opposite. And so
Mhm.
it's the opportunity to suspend what you believe to consider a different perspective.
Okay.
And there's been some really cool work done around this stuff.
Mhm.
When the Hillary Trump election was happening, some people were approached on social media saying, hey, can we mess with your algorithms? You are a solid Trump supporter. Can
Yeah.
we send you the algorithms as if you were a Hillary supporter? And
Wow.
vice versa. And what they found was that people's perspectives shifted. And
Mm.
not every Trump supporter became a Hillary supporter. Some
Mhm.
did, many did not,
Mhm.
but they softened their
Right.
view
Right.
of the other side.
So they're more open-minded, it sounds
Yeah.
like.
And
Okay.
so if we take the opportunity to get out of our own echo chamber, those places where we sit and we share trauma
Yes.
and we're
Yeah.
just like, oh, all men are bad,
Yeah.
to actually having conversations with men to try to understand their male
Mhm.
experience, now we become more well-rounded. Now we can actually start
Mm.
questioning what beliefs are actually ours. Like when this happened to me a couple of years ago, I had a guest on my podcast and he told me about when he was raped by his wife and put in the hospital for 3 or 4 days.
Oh
I
my God.
realized during that conversation that I'd not been fair to men. I'd not been seeing or trying to understand the male experience. And so I spent the next year and a half on my podcast talking about men's rights and feminism and how do we bridge that gap.
Yeah.
Now, not everybody has a podcast and they're able to do that.
Right.
But for me, it was so important that I delve into it. And I've just written a chapter for an anthology that's coming out around men's issues and women. And
Mm.
so I'm really excited to be a part of that as
That's really
well.
cool.
But
Yeah.
that's definitely one of those things, like just think opposite. That person in front of you that you disagree with has had life experiences
Mhm.
that are valid. And when
Mhm.
you discount them, you're discounting them as a person.
Right.
And nothing good can come from that.
Well, I think especially in our political climate, it's very easy. We're so polarized, right? And
Oh,
so,
yeah.
boyfriend and I are definitely at opposite ends of the spectrum.
Mm-hmm.
And I will look at him and I'll say, I understand based on who you are, why you would. I see his life. I see
Mm-hmm.
where he was raised. I understand the collective and where he gets his news. He doesn't sometimes give me the same life. He's just like, how can you think that? But I think most people go there like as
Mm-hmm.
it's a personal attack, like you're a dumbass or what's wrong with you, as opposed to what I love about you, Alison, is that I love like the expansion. You're asking people to put their big brains on, like expand, think differently. Don't just do this. So, what's cool in your life these days? Maybe it's a new business thing or personal thing. Like what is lighting you up?
Well, this work that I'm doing around my part really
Yeah.
is so cool. And before I get into that any further, I really want to
Yeah.
circle back to what you had said about how your partner doesn't always offer you the
Yeah.
same.
Right.
So much of that I think is tied to our worth, right? When we can
Mm.
convert somebody to believe what
Oh,
we
right.
believe,
Yeah.
right? Now we are more worthy
We've
because we are
won.
more
Yeah.
right.
Yeah. Right.
And
Right.
so
Yeah.
there's often that goes into it. So when we do explore the other person's perspective, that means we are suspending our need to get our worth from that situation, or we're adjusting it. Now the worth comes from, I care enough about myself to hear what you have to
Yeah.
say.
Well, I've even
Yeah.
said to him, instead of just saying you're wrong or how can you
Mhm.
believe that, why don't you ask, why do you believe that?
Mhm.
Where'd you get that? Why is that
Yeah.
important to you? You know what I mean?
Mhm.
Like,
Get curious.
get curious, because
Yeah.
nobody in the political world, I shouldn't say nobody, but most people are not engaged in that conversation. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
We're either, it's just it's over, we're going to hell, or nobody's listening to anybody, as opposed to, well, where'd you come? How did you get that? Like, why does it matter? I love that inquiry. It really softens things when people can do it. It's got a little difficult in this political conversation we're having now,
Mhm.
but like even in your relationships, even with
Yeah.
your business, even with
Yeah.
your clients, if there's a conflict, it's like, how could you come with that? Just with neutrality.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So
And without trying to guide that conversation, like
yeah,
just tell me more,
yeah,
right? And allow them that space. And I believe that being seen is a fundamental human need.
so much so.
And so
Yes,
when you
yes.
afford somebody the gift of seeing them by saying, tell me more, where does that come from? Why do you
Mhm,
think that?
mhm,
Even if it's like, why do you think I'm wrong? Like,
mhm.
be secure enough that you are not going to die if that person
Right,
doesn't agree with
right,
you.
right.
Now, that's not the same as being dismissive and go, well, we're just going to have to agree to disagree. that is not a healthy response. Right? Like they're at least said that way with that attitude.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I'm loving the work that I get to do with people around this, the conversations I get to have. I'm excited. Hopefully this year is going to bring more speaking opportunities and more opportunities to put on workshops, because I think the facilitating of this process, and it's simple. Like that's anybody who's gone through it has just said, it's so simple. It's so simple. Doesn't mean it's easy, but it is a simple step-by-step process, and you rinse and repeat.
That is so cool.
Right. And I love that I don't need people to get married to me for a long period of time to get healthy. You just take this and go. And, so at the end of my program, there's now, do you want to sign up with a $15,000 coaching package with me? Because
you're the real work.
Right. For me, I think I'm further victimizing people by doing that. So just watching people become free, which is not always to say they always love me. Like the woman that I did work, whose husband was fooling around on her. Sometimes she's just like, I hate you. I just want to blame the other person and be done with it. Right.
Well, you can. How's that working for you? Right?
Yeah, that's right. Yeah. And you can go back to the way you were. I'm not telling you can't. But now she's using this stuff with her business clients as well. And so it's super cool.
That's really awesome. So where do people find you?
Easiest place is my website, dominothinking.com. Contact information, podcast, blogs, everything is on there. And if you want to reach out, I answer all my emails. It sometimes takes me a little while, so I apologize if it's not quick, but it does happen. Yeah.
And your podcast is fun. So tell them about your podcast.
It's called Domino Thinking with Alison, and I bring on great guests like yourself, where we get to talk about our journey, that victim to freedom state journey that people have, because sometimes we don't always know what a victim state looks like. And so sometimes it's really nice to hear the stuff people go through and then how they got out of it. As examples, it's a lot like playing the game, right? When I can listen to somebody else's story and go, that's where they were and that's what they did and now they're free.
Right.
That's so cool.
Right.
Now I can start applying it to my own life. So that's really cool. And sometimes I'll just bring on guests that have a controversial point of view. Like I had a woman talking about orgasms and how it makes your business better. And it was a fun interview. She's actually going to come on again. I talked to a guy in Michigan whose son stabbed his mother, this guy's wife, 104 times and was tried as an adult. And his experience about going through the whole court system and the prison system, and now he's involved with the prison art show and all of that. And one of my guests that I talked to does volunteer work at a prison down in California. So I got to go down there and do the prison work with her. And that was incredible.
Wow.
That was truly a remarkable experience.
Yeah. Oh my gosh. Yeah. Have you watched Van Jones has a show called The Redemption Project?
No.
Check it out.
Okay.
So it's prisoners that have, usually they're either on death row or there's been a murder or something, and they do a lot of work with them, and the victims, quote, victims, face the prisoner, and they have a conversation, and there's so much healing.
Yeah.
It's because they want to hear the story, and they often terms with forgiveness, and it's fabulous. It's just
wow.
Justice
and where
Reform.
is it?
Van Jones on CNN.
Okay.
The Redemption Project. So it reminds me of this.
Okay. I will totally check it out. You know, a show I'm really loving right now is The Morning Show.
I haven't seen that.
Yeah, with Jennifer Aniston and Reese Witherspoon. And it talks about the Me Too movement.
Oh,
and,
nice. Okay.
Steve Carell. Is that his name?
Carell. He's so good.
Yeah, he was accused of sexual misconduct and fired from the show. And he was Jennifer Aniston's co-host. And so it's how people knew it was happening, but they're not being held accountable for not speaking up, and how he didn't realize he was actually forcing people to have sex with him. He thought they were willing. And I can, once you can get into this place, you can see, right? Like this woman goes up to his room and he's like, what did you think was going to happen when you came up to my room? And then he's kissing her and you can see her face, but he can't see her face.
Wow.
And so you can see that she doesn't want to be there, but she doesn't speak up. Right. So he doesn't know she doesn't want to be there. And so it's all of these layers.
It's fascinating. Yeah.
They've done a brilliant job of it. Like there's so much to it.
Cool. I will check that out. Like, gotta love good TV shows. All right. So anything else you want to say? It's like, if you got a open stage here, girl. Is there anything else, any message you want, any final words?
I just want to say to, everybody that's listening is that you are a miracle. When you think about how you were created, this little tiny sperm found this little tiny egg and made you. not 1,000 other possibilities. It made you, which makes you a miracle. And if you are a miracle, it means that you are inherently worthy. And then you're born into this world and the world tells you you're not good enough. And you believe it, because what other choice do you have? You're a child, you don't know any different, but you have worth. And when we can stop getting it from other people and get it from inside, it can change our whole life. So remember, you are inherently worthy.
Mm.
Yeah.
So beautiful. You're so cool. You know, seriously, like I do a lot of podcasts, and when I like within 5 minutes, Alison and I were like, I really like this chick. And and so it's really fun to get to interview, to hear your story, to hear your commitment to the work, to hear your journey. And I love, love, love the way you are about the worthy part. I didn't know that. It's like, because I was talking about more the thinking piece of it, you know, the domino thinking and the looking at different. I love this piece of it and the stand you are in the world. And you're a beautiful example of it. So thanks for showing up and being you, girl.
Thanks for the platform. You know, this is what makes the world go around. And I think you're absolutely brilliant for having this show and just really providing examples with other guests as well about how we can show up authentically. And there's that word again. And fierce as fuck, right?
Fierce as fuck. Yay. Right. Absolutely. All right. So domino thinking, right?
Yes. Dominothinking.com.
Dominothinking.com. All right. So I hope y'all have loved this show as much as I have. And mostly really tune in, ask yourself, like, am I still holding on to any victim stuff? You know, here's the work I do. You know, my little pendulums, and I could just go, oh, you're holding on to that 50%, you know, but you can ask your own energy. You can ask your own body. You can ask your soul, like, am I at peace here? Is there something I'm getting by like, oh, and he did that and that didn't work? Like, because lots of times we can use as an excuse for playing small, for not showing up, for not being our brilliance. And what I say is, there's somebody freaking praying for you. How dare you? Somebody is literally waiting for you to step up and shine your light. How dare you stay in your small self, right? It is our work to get our stuff in the world. And so that means you've got to do the work. So you've got a brilliant demonstration here. If you are looking for support, check out Alison's work, check out my work. We can really help you shift away from victim consciousness. My thing is, I'm a shame buster. Nobody will have shame on my watch. And so that's my thing. And so reach out if you need more support. In the meantime, much love, many blessings. Bye now.